In a quiet, small-town police station, on what seemed like an ordinary day, the unexpected happens. A muddy, exhausted golden retriever stumbles through the doors, carrying a tiny, trembling puppy in her mouth. Then she disappears, only to return again and again, bringing more puppies, one by one, before collapsing from sheer exhaustion. At first, the officers are stunned, unsure of what to make of her desperate actions. But Officer Ryan Mitchell, a man hardened by his own past, senses something deeper. This isn't just a lost dog. She's running. From what or who, no one can say just yet. What follows is a journey of survival, courage, and unexpected kindness as Ryan and his team uncover a chilling truth. This dog, now named Hope, is fleeing from something dark and dangerous. As shadows close in around them, Ryan finds himself risking everything to protect her and her pups. But in doing so, he discovers that sometimes the ones we save end up saving us. What was she running from? Who's out there, still looking for her? And can Ryan keep her safe before it's too late? The early morning sunlight filtered softly through the windows of the small-town police station, casting faint golden streaks across faded walls. Officer Ryan Mitchell sat at his desk, eyes heavy, as he flipped through an ever-growing pile of paperwork. The quiet hum of a slow morning surrounded him, muffled conversations from the few officers on duty, the occasional creak of chairs, and the faint buzz of the ancient coffee machine in the break room. Ryan sighed and ran a hand through his short brown hair. Most days in Willow Creek were just like this, uneventful and forgettable. A lost wallet here, a noisy neighbor complaint there, maybe a few speeding tickets. It was a far cry from the excitement most people imagined when they thought about police work. But Ryan preferred it that way. His days of chaos were behind him, or so he told himself. Ryan leaned back in his chair, staring at the clock. 8:15. The same time he always thought about his past, about choices that went wrong, and opportunities he had let slip away. For most of his life, Ryan had been good at keeping people at a distance, a habit born from loss. Growing up in foster care after his mother died had taught him that opening up meant risking disappointment. He rubbed his eyes and focused back on the paper in front of him when the station door creaked open with a loud groan. No one looked up at first. People wandered in all the time for small things. Then he heard it, the unmistakable click of nails on the wooden floor, a sound that grew louder with each second. Ryan glanced up, his brow furrowing. A muddy golden retriever stood in the middle of the room, panting heavily, her fur matted and dripping with mud. Clenched gently in her mouth was a tiny, squirming puppy. "What the?" Ryan muttered, standing quickly. The dog's wide, desperate eyes scanned the room as she carefully laid the puppy on the floor. She looked at the small bundle for only a moment, before turning sharply and bolting back out through the open door. Was that a dog? Linda Carter's voice broke through the stunned silence. Linda, a fellow officer and one of Ryan's closest colleagues, had been standing by the filing cabinet. "Yeah," Ryan replied, already moving toward the puppy. It was tiny, barely able to fit in his hand when he knelt and scooped it up. Its whimper was faint, but it stirred something inside him. The room seemed to wake up around him as Linda and a couple of other officers gathered. "Where did she go?" Linda asked, her voice laced with concern. "I do not know," Ryan said, shaking his head. "But something is not right." Before anyone could answer, the golden retriever burst back into the station, panting even harder this time. In her mouth, she carried a second puppy. She placed it beside the first, looked up at Ryan for a moment, and then disappeared again. "Is she serious?" one of the officers whispered, his voice laced with disbelief. Ryan did not reply. His chest tightened as he cradled the two trembling puppies. Their tiny bodies squirmed against each other, seeking warmth. He turned to Linda. "Grab a blanket," he said, his voice firm but calm. Linda nodded, her face pale, and rushed to the storage room. The golden retriever returned once more, her movements slower and shakier. She placed a third puppy down, her breath coming in ragged bursts. This time, she lingered longer, her eyes darting around the room before she stumbled back toward the door. "She's exhausted," Ryan said softly. He placed the two puppies on a folded towel that Linda had brought back. "What is she doing?" Linda whispered. "Saving them," Ryan answered, a weight settling in his chest. The dog returned one final time, but she barely made it through the door. She wobbled under the weight of the fourth puppy and collapsed onto the cold floor as soon as she laid it down. Ryan moved quickly. He grabbed the last puppy and knelt beside the mother dog, his hand brushing over her muddy coat. Her ribs were faintly visible beneath her fur, and her sides heaved with every breath. "You did good, girl," he murmured. "You did really good." The golden retriever lifted her head slightly, her tired eyes meeting his. In that moment, Ryan saw something that made his throat tighten, a mix of exhaustion, trust, and sheer determination. "Someone gets water," Ryan called out over his shoulder. Linda placed a bowl near the dog, and Ryan gently stroked her head. "Rest now. You're safe." The station had fallen silent. Officers who had been busy moments earlier now stood around, watching with quiet reverence. The golden retriever finally lapped at the water, her eyes darting toward her puppies, who were curled together on the blanket. Ryan glanced up at Linda. "Call Dr. Patel," he said firmly. "She needs a vet now." Linda pulled out her phone and stepped away to make the call. Meanwhile, Ryan stayed by the dog's side. He could not look away. Her breathing had slowed, but she kept glancing toward the door, as if waiting for something or someone. Ryan frowned. "What were you running from?" he murmured, his mind racing. It was not normal for a dog to show up like this, carrying her puppies one by one. She must have been fleeing something, and the scratches on her legs suggested she had been running through rough terrain. Linda returned, her voice soft. "Dr. Patel will be here in 20 minutes. Ryan nodded. "Good." Suddenly, the dog let out a low whine, her body tensing. Her eyes darted toward the door. Ryan felt it too, a shift in the air, a quiet unease. He rose to his feet, his hand instinctively resting on the holster at his side. "I'll be right back," he told Linda, who was watching him with wide eyes. Stepping outside, Ryan scanned the quiet street. For a moment, nothing seemed out of place. The hum of small-town life carried on distant chatter from the diner across the street, the faint rustling of leaves in the trees. But then he saw it. A black truck sat parked at the edge of the woods, its engine idling softly. The windows were tinted, and it did not belong to anyone Ryan recognized. His gut twisted. "This is not random," Ryan muttered to himself. He turned and hurried back inside, where the golden retriever was watching the door. Her gaze met his again, and Ryan realized she had not just stumbled into the police station by chance. She had chosen it. Linda looked up as Ryan entered. "What is it?" "There's a truck parked by the woods," Ryan said. "It doesn't feel right." Linda frowned. "You think someone's after her?" Ryan glanced back at the mother dog, who was now resting beside her puppies. Despite her exhaustion, her eyes stayed fixed on the door. "I think she was running from something or someone," Ryan said quietly. "And whatever it was, it is not over yet." The air in the station seemed to grow heavy with tension. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, and Linda's brow furrowed. "What do we do?" she asked. Ryan's jaw tightened. "First, we keep her safe. Then we figure out what happened." He crouched back down beside the dog, his hand resting gently on her head. She blinked up at him, her breathing slow and steady now. For the first time, Ryan let himself feel it, the responsibility that had suddenly been placed on his shoulders. "It's okay," he said softly. "We'll take care of you." The golden retriever let out a soft sigh, as if finally allowing herself to believe him. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of the police station and the blanket-wrapped puppies, Ryan knew this was only the beginning of a much bigger story. The air inside the small-town police station was tense, a quiet hum of uncertainty filling the room. Officer Ryan Mitchell sat at his desk, the events of the last hour replaying in his mind. He glanced over at the golden retriever lying on a blanket spread across the floor, her body still trembling from exhaustion. Her 4 puppies were nestled against her side, their tiny whimpers breaking the silence every so often. "Ryan!" Linda Carter's voice cut through the quiet, bringing him back to the moment. She stood by the window, her phone still clutched in her hand. "Dr. Patel is 5 minutes out." Ryan nodded, but did not look up. His eyes remained fixed on the golden retriever. On the way, her eyes stayed locked on the door. She was tired, too tired to move, but she was still alert, as though she expected something or someone to barge through at any moment. "You think she was running from something?" Linda asked, stepping closer. "I don't think," Ryan said quietly. "I know." Linda tilted her head, a concerned crease appearing between her brows. "The truck?" Ryan sighed, running a hand through his short hair. "Yeah, that truck. It's still sitting there, just parked by the woods." A heavy silence followed. "Could be nothing," Linda offered, though her tone suggested she did not believe it herself. Ryan shook his head. "It is not nothing." He pushed back his chair and stood. "I'll check it out." Linda hesitated. "You want me to come with you?" "No," Ryan said firmly. "Stay here. Make sure no one comes near her." He glanced at the golden retriever again. "She came to us for help. We owe her that much." Linda nodded, watching as Ryan grabbed his jacket and made his way outside. The bright morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, but a chill still hung in the air as Ryan stepped out onto the station's front steps. He scanned the street, his sharp eyes landing on the black truck parked at the edge of the woods. It was still there, engine idling faintly. Ryan's gut twisted. Something about it was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Pulling his jacket tighter against the cold, Ryan strode across the street and onto the grassy path leading toward the truck. The sound of his boots crunching against the gravel cut through the stillness, but the truck did not move. As he approached, Ryan's hand rested instinctively on the holster at his side. The truck was old, its black paint dulled and streaked with dirt. There were faint scratches along the side, as if something or someone had clawed at it. Ryan's pulse quickened. He stopped a few feet from the truck and called out, his voice firm and steady. "Anyone in there?" Nothing. The engine continued to hum softly. Ryan took another step forward, his eyes narrowing as he peered through the tinted windows. The inside was dark, the glass too obscured to see anything clearly. Slowly he circled the vehicle, his gaze landing on the truck bed. What he saw made his stomach drop. There, tangled in a heap, were several old ropes and a dirty blanket smeared with mud and dark stains. Stains Ryan knew were blood. His jaw tightened. The pieces started falling into place. The dog's desperate arrival, her scratches, her exhausted collapse. She had not just run here, she had escaped. His radio crackled to life on his shoulder, and Linda's voice broke through. "Ryan, Dr. Patel just got here. You find anything?" Ryan lifted the radio, his voice low and tense. "Yeah, I found something. Get someone from dispatch out here now. I want this truck checked for prints." There was a beat of silence. "You think someone was after her?" Linda asked finally. "I don't think," Ryan said, his tone hardening. "I know." Back at the station, Dr. Maria Patel knelt beside the golden retriever, her practiced hands working gently as she examined her. The mother dog flinched slightly but did not resist, as though she understood that Maria was trying to help. "You are a strong girl," Maria murmured softly, her voice soothing. She glanced over at Linda, who was watching from nearby. "She's dehydrated and exhausted, but no major injuries. The scratches on her legs are from running through rough terrain, probably the woods." "And the puppies?" Linda asked. "They are malnourished, But they will recover with care, Maria said, smiling faintly. She has been doing her best to keep them alive. Linda's expression softened as she looked at the puppies who were huddled together on the blanket. She saved them, she whispered. Yes, Maria agreed. And now it is our turn to help her. Ryan returned to the station just as Maria was finishing up. He paused in the doorway, watching the scene in front of him. Maria kneeling beside the mother dog, Linda crouched near the puppies, and the other officers watching quietly from a distance. The golden retriever seemed calmer now, though her eyes still flicked nervously toward the door every so often. Ryan knew that look. She had not forgotten what she was running from. Maria looked up as Ryan approached. She's in rough shape, but she will be okay with proper care. Ryan nodded. Good. Linda straightened, her expression cautious. Find anything? Ryan's jaw tightened as he glanced back toward the golden retriever. Whoever did this, they did not want her getting away. Linda's face paled. You think she escaped from someone? Ryan nodded grimly. Yeah. And I think they were chasing her. The room fell silent. Ryan turned his attention back to the mother dog, who was watching him with tired eyes. He crouched beside her, his voice soft. You came to the right place, girl. We will keep you safe. The golden retriever blinked slowly, as though she understood. Her puppies stirred beside her, their tiny bodies wriggling closer for warmth. Dispatch is sending someone to check the truck, Ryan said, rising to his feet. But I have a feeling whoever did this is still out there. What now? Linda asked. Ryan glanced at the mother dog, at the way her eyes still held that faint flicker of fear. Now, we wait, he said firmly, and we stay ready. That night, after the station had grown quiet again, Ryan found himself lingering by the blanket where the mother dog and her puppies were sleeping. Maria had left instructions for their care, promising to return the next morning. Ryan knelt beside the dog, resting a hand gently on her head. She stirred slightly, but did not open her eyes. You are safe now, he whispered. As he sat there, the weight of the day settled in his chest. Ryan had spent so much of his life avoiding attachments, avoiding the risk of caring too deeply. But something about this dog, her desperation, her bravery, had cracked through the walls he had built. He glanced at the puppies, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each soft breath. They were fragile, so vulnerable, and yet they had survived because their mother refused to give up. Ryan looked back at the golden retriever, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You are a fighter, he said softly. I guess we both are. The dog's ear twitched as though she had heard him, and for the first time in a long time, Ryan felt something shift inside him. It was not just about the dog or the puppies. It was about finding hope again, about learning to trust that sometimes people and animals alike came into your life for a reason. And as Ryan sat there in the quiet, he realized that this was only the beginning. The morning light crept into the police station, stretching across the worn floorboards where the golden retriever and her puppies slept. The quiet hum of the station felt softer today, as if everyone was holding their breath. Officer Ryan Mitchell sat at his desk, a cup of coffee cooling beside him, but his attention stayed fixed on the mother dog, her chest rising and falling steadily now. For the first time, she looked at peace. You stayed here all night? Linda Carter's voice broke the silence. She stood in the doorway, a brown paper bag in her hand and a curious expression on her face. Ryan glanced up, the dark circles under his eyes betraying his exhaustion. Yeah, someone had to make sure she was okay. Linda smirked and dropped the bag on his desk. Here, I brought you a breakfast sandwich. You look like you could use it. Ryan grunted a quiet thanks and unwrapped the sandwich. He was halfway through a bite when Dr. Maria Patel arrived, her warm demeanor immediately lighting up the room. Good morning, Maria greeted, a small medical bag slung over her shoulder. She knelt beside the golden retriever, speaking softly. How are we this morning, sweetheart? The mother dog's eyes fluttered open, her ears perking slightly as she looked up at Maria. It was a small reaction, but it gave Ryan a flicker of hope. She looks better, Maria said, running her hands gently along the dog's sides. Her breathing is steadier, and she's resting well. You must have taken good care of her last night. Ryan shrugged, trying to act as if it were no big deal. She did all the work. I just sat here. Maria gave him a knowing smile. Sometimes sitting with someone or something makes all the difference. Linda tilted her head toward Ryan. See? You are softer than you let on. Ryan scowled but said nothing, his gaze drifting back to the golden retriever. He could not explain why he felt so invested in her survival. Maybe it was her bravery, or the desperation in her eyes when she first arrived. Or maybe it was the way she reminded him of himself, worn down, but still fighting. Maria stood and turned to Linda. Her puppies are healthy for now, but they need a safe place to stay, a quiet environment where she can recover properly. Her eyes flicked to Ryan. It would be best if they were not here in the middle of a police station. Ryan nodded. I can take them to your clinic. Maria hesitated. That's not a long-term solution. She needs calm, not the sound of doors slamming or constant chatter. Ryan frowned, considering. Then where do you suggest? Maria studied him for a moment before saying softly, Your place, Ryan. What? He blinked, startled. No, Why not? Maria cut him off gently. You clearly care about her. She trusts you. Besides, you live alone, don't you? Ryan glanced at Linda, who was smirking again. She has a point, Linda said, crossing her arms. It's either your place or the animal shelter, and we both know she deserves better. Ryan let out a long sigh, his shoulders slumping. Fine, my place. Maria smiled. Good. I'll help you get them settled. Ryan's apartment was small but clean, a modest one-bedroom above a quiet hardware store on Willow Creek's main street. He rarely had visitors, and his living space reflected that. The walls were bare, save for a few framed certificates from his academy days, and the furniture was minimal. A couch, a small kitchen table, and a single recliner in front of the television. Maria followed Ryan inside, carrying a crate holding the 4 puppies, while Ryan led the golden retriever, now sporting a clean bandage on her front leg, on a makeshift leash. Not exactly cozy, Maria teased lightly, her eyes sweeping the bare space. But it will do. It's fine, Ryan said gruffly. They will not care what the walls look like. He helped Maria lay down a large blanket in a corner of the living room, adding a few old towels for extra padding. Maria set the puppies down gently, and the golden retriever immediately lay beside them, her body curling protectively around her babies. She's going to need food and water, Maria said, handing Ryan a list she had scribbled down earlier. I'll bring by some puppy formula just in case. You should probably stop by the store for dog food too. Ryan stared at the list, feeling slightly overwhelmed. It had been years since he had shared his space with anyone, or anything, but now his living room was home to a tired mother dog and her 4 newborns. Maria stood and grabbed her bag. You're doing a good thing, Ryan. I hope you know that. He shrugged, just helping out. Maria gave him a kind smile. Sometimes, helping others is exactly what we need to help ourselves. Ryan watched as Maria left, her words lingering in his mind. He glanced back at the golden retriever, who looked up at him with tired but trusting eyes. You are making yourself at home already, he muttered, though his tone was softer than before. He filled a bowl with water and placed it beside her, watching as she lapped at it gratefully. Ryan lowered himself onto the recliner, stretching his legs out as he took in the unusual sight in front of him. His apartment, which had always felt quiet and empty, now felt different. The air was warmer somehow, filled with the soft sounds of the puppies shifting and the occasional sigh from their mother. As the morning wore on, Ryan found himself watching the little family more closely. He had not expected to feel this way, this protective urge to keep them safe. He let his head rest against the back of the chair, closing his eyes briefly. He thought of his childhood, bouncing from one foster home to another, never feeling like he belonged anywhere. The golden retriever had risked everything to save her puppies, to give them a chance. Ryan could not help but feel a connection to her. "You're tougher than most," he murmured, his voice breaking the quiet. "I guess we have that in common." The golden retriever lifted her head slightly, her ears twitching at the sound of his voice. She blinked slowly, her gaze meeting his. Ryan felt his chest tighten. There was trust in those eyes, trust he had not felt from anyone in a long time. The hours passed quietly. Ryan left only briefly to grab the supplies Maria had listed. When he returned with bags of food, toys, and a small crate for the puppies, the golden retriever watched him carefully, her tail thumping faintly against the floor. It was the first time he had seen her wag it. By evening, the apartment felt different. Ryan could not pinpoint the change, but something about sharing his space, about giving this little family a safe haven, made him feel lighter. He sat on the floor beside the golden retriever, his back against the couch. One of the puppies wriggled out of the blanket and curled up near his leg, its tiny body warm against him. Ryan stared at the little creature for a long moment before reaching down to gently stroke its fur. "Looks like you were sticking around for a while," he murmured, glancing at the golden retriever. "You need a name." The dog tilted her head slightly, as though listening. Ryan considered for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Hope," he said softly. "That's what we will call you, Hope." The golden retriever blinked up at him, her expression unreadable. But when her tail thumped the floor again, Ryan knew he had chosen the right name. For the first time in years, Ryan's apartment felt like more than just a place to sleep. It felt like home. And as he sat there in the quiet, with Hope and her puppies resting peacefully nearby, Ryan could not help but feel that this was the start of something bigger, something he did not fully understand yet, but something that mattered. For the first time in a long while, Ryan Mitchell woke to the sound of life inside his apartment. It was faint at first, the gentle shuffling of tiny paws on the blanket, the soft whines of newborn puppies, and the faint thump of Hope's tail as she stirred. Blinking against the morning light streaming through his small window, Ryan sat up on the recliner. His neck ached from sleeping in the chair, but he barely noticed. The room felt warmer, more alive, and for once, the emptiness he had grown used to seemed to have lifted. Ryan glanced at the corner of the living room where Hope lay curled around her pups. She was awake now, watching him with her soft brown eyes, as if to say, "We made it through the night." "Morning, girl," Ryan murmured, stretching his stiff shoulders. He got up and grabbed the bag of dog food from the counter, pouring some into a small bowl. He had bought it the day before, feeling oddly unsure of himself as he stood in the pet aisle, staring at the endless options. He set the food down next to Hope and refilled her water bowl. She sniffed the food cautiously before eating in slow, careful bites. Ryan crouched beside her and reached out to gently scratch behind her ears. "You are tougher than you look, you know that?" Hope paused for a moment, her gaze meeting his. There was something about her expression grateful, yet weary, that tugged at something deep in Ryan's chest. "Guess we are stuck with each other for now," he added quietly, shaking his head with a faint smile. Just as he stood, his phone buzzed on the table. He grabbed it quickly, answering without checking the caller ID. "Mitchell." "It is Linda," came her voice, sharp and no nonsense. "Where are you?" "At home." "Why?" Ryan frowned. "I thought you should know," Linda continued, her tone edged with concern. "The black truck is back. Someone saw it parked near Dr. Patel's clinic this morning. Same description, tinted windows, engine running." Ryan's heart sank and his jaw tightened. "They are looking for her." "That's what I am thinking," Linda replied. "You need to stay sharp. If these guys are who we think they are, They will not stop until they get what they want. Ryan glanced back at Hope. She had finished eating and was watching him, her body tense as though sensing something was wrong. "Got it," he said quickly. "I will call you if I see anything." "Be careful, Ryan," Linda warned, before the line went dead. Ryan stared at his phone for a moment, his thoughts racing. These men were dangerous. He could feel it in his gut. Whatever they wanted from Hope, it was not good. An hour later, Ryan had packed the puppies into a sturdy crate lined with towels and helped Hope into the back seat of his old pickup truck. She moved slowly, her legs still stiff, but she climbed in without protest. "We are not taking any chances," Ryan said softly, stroking her head before shutting the door. He drove carefully through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, his eyes scanning the road ahead and the rearview mirror for any sign of trouble. It was still early, and the town was just waking up. A few shops were opening their doors, and the diner on Main Street was already busy with regulars sipping coffee and reading the morning paper. As he pulled up to Dr. Patel's clinic, Ryan let out a breath of relief. The parking lot was empty, save for Maria's old station wagon parked near the entrance. He climbed out and opened the back door, helping Hope out of the truck. She moved cautiously, her eyes darting toward the quiet street. "It is okay, girl," Ryan said softly. "You are safe here." Inside, Maria was already waiting, her warm smile easing some of the tension that had knotted Ryan's shoulders. "Good morning," she greeted, crouching to examine Hope as Ryan carried the crate of puppies inside. "How is she holding up?" Maria asked, rising to her feet. "Better, I think," Ryan replied. "She ate this morning, and she has been resting." Maria smiled and gave Hope a gentle pat. "She is a fighter." Ryan glanced toward the window, his unease growing. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. Maria raised an eyebrow but nodded, motioning him toward the front desk. "What is going on?" Ryan lowered his voice. "That black truck is back. Linda said someone saw it near here earlier this morning." Maria's expression darkened. "You think they are looking for her?" Ryan nodded. "I do not think this was random. They were after her before, and they will keep looking." He glanced back at Hope, who had settled on a blanket Maria had spread out. "She came to the station for a reason. She knew we could help." Maria's voice, but there was concern in her eyes. "What do we do now? I want her out of sight," Ryan said firmly. "Do you have a secure back room? Somewhere they will not see her through the windows?" Maria nodded. "Yes, I have a supply room in the back. It is quiet, and the windows are small." "Good," Ryan said. "Keep her there for now. I'll stay here for a while and keep watch." Ryan spent the next few hours watching from the clinic's front window, his sharp eyes scanning the street for any sign of the black truck. Willow Creek was small, too small for strangers to go unnoticed, and Ryan's instincts told him it was only a matter of time before the men returned. Hope stayed in the back room with her puppies, resting on a bed of blankets Maria had carefully arranged. Every so often, Ryan would check on her, and each time she would lift her head slightly as if to reassure him that she was still there. Around midday, Maria brought Ryan a cup of coffee, her expression softening as she watched him. "You care about her, don't you?" Ryan hesitated, staring into his cup. "Yeah," he said finally. "She has been through enough. I'm not going to let anyone hurt her again." Maria smiled faintly. "She is lucky she found you." Ryan shook his head. "I think I am the lucky one." By late afternoon, Ryan's unease turned to dread when Linda's voice crackled over his radio. "Ryan, you there?" "I'm here," he answered, already sensing bad news. "The truck is on the move," Linda said sharply. It was spotted leaving the woods and heading toward town. Ryan's pulse quickened. "How long ago?" "Not long," Linda replied. "They could be close." Ryan pushed away from the desk, his jaw tight. "I will get Hope and the puppies out of here." Ryan, Linda began, but he had already clicked the radio off. Maria appeared in the doorway, alarmed. What is happening? They are coming, Ryan said quickly. We need to move her now. Maria nodded and hurried to the back room while Ryan went to start his truck. The engine rumbled to life as Ryan pulled it around to the clinic's back entrance. When Maria brought Hope out, she moved quickly but carefully, the crate of puppies balanced in her arms. Ryan opened the truck door, helping Hope into the back seat, before taking the crate from Maria. Where will you take her? Maria asked, her voice shaking slightly. Somewhere they cannot follow, Ryan said firmly. I will call you when we are safe. He climbed into the driver's seat and pulled away from the clinic, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The roads were quiet, but Ryan could not shake the feeling that someone was watching. As he turned onto a back road leading out of town, Ryan glanced in the rearview mirror. His heart sank. A black truck was following him. Ryan's jaw clenched and his pulse quickened. Hang on, girl, he muttered under his breath. Hope let out a soft whine from the back seat, as if she understood. The chase had begun. Ryan's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles turning white as the black truck loomed in the rearview mirror. It was there too close for comfort, its engine a low, menacing growl that sent chills up his spine. The truck wasn't trying to hide anymore. Whoever was driving wanted Ryan to know they were coming for him, for Hope, and for the helpless pups nestled in the crate beside her. Ryan glanced over his shoulder at the back seat. Hope lay curled protectively around the puppies, her body tense, her wide eyes locked on his, and for a moment Ryan saw it again, that look of trust, of quiet desperation. I won't let anything happen to you, he muttered, his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his chest. Not now. The road ahead was narrow and empty, flanked by dense woods on either side. Ryan's truck bounced over the uneven pavement as he pressed down on the accelerator, his old vehicle groaning in protest. He kept glancing in the mirror, watching the black truck close the gap. Who were these guys? He didn't know their faces, but the signs were all their rope, blood, the scratches on Hope. They were part of something cruel, something dark. And Ryan knew that if they caught up, Hope and her puppies wouldn't stand a chance. The black truck suddenly swerved, inching closer to Ryan's bumper. The driver was trying to force him off the road. Not happening, Ryan muttered through clenched teeth. His mind raced, searching for options. If he stayed on the open road, they would eventually corner him. He needed to get out of sight, find a place where they couldn't follow. Up ahead, a small dirt path veered off to the right, leading into the woods. Ryan knew it was risky. The path was rough, overgrown, and winding, but it was his only chance. He turned the wheel sharply, his truck skidding as it swerved onto the dirt road. The tires kicked up gravel and dust, and the sudden shift made the puppies whimper in the back seat. Easy, guys, Ryan said quickly, glancing back at them. We're okay. Hope let out a low, anxious whine, her eyes darting toward the window as the truck jolted over a bump. The black truck followed close behind, its tires grinding against the dirt as it sped after them. Branches slapped against Ryan's windshield, leaving thin scratches in the glass. The road narrowed, the trees crowding closer, but Ryan kept going. Come on, he muttered under his breath. Just a little farther. The dirt road curved sharply, and Ryan jerked the wheel to keep control. The black truck behind him hesitated for just a moment at the bend, and Ryan seized the opportunity. He spotted an old, overgrown trail splitting off to the left and veered onto it without slowing down. The path was nearly invisible, more like a forgotten hiking trail than a road. Overhanging branches scraped the sides of his truck, but he kept going, heart pounding as he watched the rear-view mirror. The black truck had missed the turn. Ryan exhaled sharply, his chest heaving as he realized they had a lead, however brief. He slowed the truck down just enough to navigate the uneven terrain, branches snapping under his tires as he wound deeper into the woods. The noise of the other vehicle faded behind him until there was nothing but the sound of his engine and the rustling of leaves. Finally, Ryan spotted a small clearing up ahead. He eased the truck to a stop, cutting the engine. Silence settled around him, heavy and watchful. Ryan sat there for a moment, his hand still gripping the wheel as the adrenaline slowly faded. He turned in his seat and looked at Hope. She was still curled tightly around the crate of puppies, her eyes wide and alert. "We're okay," Ryan said softly, his voice breaking the quiet. "For now, anyway." Hope let out a small, shaky breath, as if she understood. Ryan stepped out of the truck, the door creaking loudly in the stillness. He moved quickly, scanning the area. The clearing was small and surrounded by dense forest. No roads, no trails, just trees as far as the eye could see. It was not perfect, but it would buy them time. He opened the back door and crouched beside Hope, his hand resting gently on her head. "You are safe here," he said, his voice low and steady. "We'll stay until I figure out what to do next." Hope blinked up at him, her body relaxing just a little. Ryan grabbed his phone from his pocket and dialed Linda's number. She answered on the first ring. "Ryan, where are you? I've been trying to get a hold of you." "We had company," Ryan said grimly. "They were following me." "Are you okay?" Linda's voice was sharp with concern. "We're fine for now," Ryan replied. "I lost them in the woods, but it won't take them long to figure out where we went." "Ryan, this is getting out of hand," Linda said. "We need to call in backup, get the state troopers involved." "I know," Ryan interrupted, his jaw tight. "But I am not leaving her out in the open, not until I know she's safe." Linda paused. "Where are you now?" "Hiding out in the woods," Ryan said. "I'll text you my location. Send someone to meet me here, but tell them to keep it quiet. I don't want those guys picking up on it." "Understood," Linda replied. "Stay put, and be careful. You're not alone in this, Ryan." "I know," he said softly. "Thanks, Linda." He hung up and looked back at Hope. She was watching him intently, her ears perked. Ryan crouched down beside her again, his hand brushing gently over her fur. "You are a tough one," he said quietly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "But we'll get through this, I promise." Ryan leaned against the truck, keeping an eye on the clearing. The puppies had quieted, nestled together in the crate, as if they could sense the calm settling over their mother. The woods around them were still, broken only by the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustle of leaves in the breeze. For a moment, Ryan allowed himself to breathe. He thought back to the black truck, to the men who were willing to hunt down a helpless dog and her pups. It angered him, not just because of the cruelty, but because he knew how hopeless she must have felt when she first ran into the station. "I know what it feels like to run," he murmured, more to himself than to Hope. "To think no one's coming for you." Ryan had spent much of his childhood moving from one foster home to the next, never staying in one place long enough to feel safe. He remembered the nights spent wondering if anyone cared, if anyone would ever fight for him. And now, here he was fighting for her. Hope shifted slightly, her head resting on her paws as her gaze softened. It was as if she could sense what he was feeling. Ryan's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him back to the present. It was a text from Linda. "Backup is en route. Hang tight." Ryan let out a breath. He looked at Hope and the puppies once more, his voice quiet but firm. "Help is coming, girl. We are not alone anymore." Hope's tail thumped faintly against the blanket, and for the first time in what felt like hours, Ryan smiled. For now they were safe, and for Ryan, that was enough. The clearing grew quieter as the afternoon light faded, the sunlight filtering through the trees in scattered, golden beams. Ryan leaned against his truck, his eyes scanning the woods for any sign of movement. He knew it was only a matter of time before the men in the black truck figured out where he had gone. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Hope lay in the back seat, her body curled protectively around the puppies in the crate. Every now and then, her head would lift, ears twitching at the faintest sound. She was restless, and Ryan could feel it too, that creeping unease that someone was watching, even when the forest seemed still. The sound of tires crunching against dirt jolted him upright. Ryan's hand went instinctively to the holster at his hip as he peered down the path leading into the clearing. Seconds later, a familiar SUV emerged, its headlights flicking off as it rolled to a stop. The door opened, and Officer Linda Carter stepped out, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. She raised her hands slightly as she walked toward him. "Easy. It's just me." Ryan relaxed, lowering his hand as Linda approached. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice low. "I had to double back twice to make sure I wasn't followed," Linda replied, glancing warily toward the surrounding trees. "This place is out in the middle of nowhere." "That was the point," Ryan muttered, motioning toward the truck. "She's in the back. The puppies are okay, but I don't want to keep them out here any longer than we have to." Linda peered into the back seat, her face softening when she saw Hope. "Hey there, girl," she murmured gently. Hope lifted her head, her tail thumping faintly against the seat as she looked at Linda with tired, wary eyes. Linda turned back to Ryan, her expression serious. "Dispatch got your report about the truck. We ran the plate." Ryan's stomach tightened. "And?" Linda sighed, glancing back toward the trees as though the answer might be lurking out there. "The truck is linked to a guy named Victor Hale. He's got a record, a long one. Illegal dog fighting, animal abuse, you name it." Ryan clenched his fists. "So, we were right." "Yeah," Linda replied softly. "It looks like Hope and her puppies were being used for breeding. When she escaped, they must have come after her. My guess? She's worth a lot to them, and they don't want to lose that." Ryan glanced toward Hope, who was watching them intently through the window. The thought of what she had endured, what she had fought so hard to escape, made his chest tighten with anger. "She's not going back to them," he said, his voice low but firm. Linda nodded. "I already called in a few favors. Animal control is getting involved, and we've got some state troopers combing the woods. If Victor's still out here, we'll find him." Ryan let out a slow breath. "Good, but until then, we're keeping her safe." Linda tilted her head, watching him closely. "You're really invested in this, aren't you?" Ryan hesitated, his gaze drifting back to Hope. "Yeah, I guess I am." Linda's expression softened. "You know, for someone who acts like he doesn't care about much, you've got a funny way of proving yourself wrong." Ryan smirked faintly, though his voice remained serious. "She came to us because she had nowhere else to go. I know what that feels like." Linda didn't press him further. Instead, she nodded and said, "Let's get her out of here. I'll follow you back to town." Ryan took the lead, his truck bouncing gently over the uneven path as he made his way back toward the main road. Linda's SUV followed close behind, her headlights cutting through the growing darkness. The woods seemed quieter now, but Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there, watching. Every so often, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Hope lay in the back seat, her head resting on her paws as the puppies slept beside her. She was calm now, her breathing steady, but Ryan knew that the danger hadn't passed. As they neared the edge of the woods, Ryan's phone buzzed on the seat beside him. He picked it up quickly, his eyes darting between the screen and the road. It was a text from Linda. "Truck spotted on Main Street. Be careful." Ryan's jaw tightened. "So they're back," he muttered under his breath. He glanced at Hope in the mirror. "Almost there, girl. Just hang on." By the time Ryan pulled into the vet clinic's parking lot, the sky had darkened to a deep navy blue. Maria's station wagon was already parked outside, its headlights casting long shadows across the pavement. Ryan parked his truck near the back entrance, cutting the engine and stepping out quickly. Linda pulled in beside him, climbing out of her SUV with a wary glance toward the street. "We need to hurry," she said. "I don't like this." Ryan nodded and opened the back door. "Come on, Hope," he said gently, reaching for her leash. She hesitated for a moment, her ears twitching, but then she climbed down carefully, her tired legs wobbling slightly. Ryan lifted the crate of puppies from the back seat and motioned for Linda to open the clinic door. Inside, the clinic was quiet, the only sound coming from the hum of the overhead lights. Maria appeared quickly, her face filled with relief when she saw them. "Thank goodness," she said softly, crouching to stroke Hope's fur. "I was starting to worry." Ryan set the crate down in the corner of the exam room, where Maria had laid out a soft blanket. Hope followed closely, curling up protectively around her pups once again. "She needs a safe place to rest," Ryan said, his voice calm but tense. "Those guys aren't going to stop until they find her." Maria nodded, glancing up at him. "She can stay here. I'll lock the doors and keep her in the back room. No one's getting to her tonight." Linda stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I'll stay out front and keep watch. If Victor or his guys come looking, they'll have to get through me first." Ryan hesitated, his eyes darting to Hope. She was already drifting off, her puppies nestled close to her side. "I'll stay too," he said finally, "just to be sure." Linda arched an eyebrow. "You planning on sleeping on the floor again?" Ryan smirked faintly. "Wouldn't be the first time." Maria smiled gently. "You can use the break room, Ryan. It has an old couch better than the floor, I promise." Ryan glanced at Hope one last time, his heart softening as he watched her relax for the first time since she had come into his life. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I'll make sure of it." The night stretched on, the clinic silent except for the occasional hum of the furnace. Ryan sat on the worn couch in the break room, his mind refusing to quiet. He couldn't shake the image of the black truck or the men who had been hunting Hope. They were still out there, he knew it, but what lingered most was the quiet bond that had begun to form between him and the golden retriever. She trusted him now, and that trust came with responsibility. Ryan leaned back, staring at the ceiling as exhaustion tugged at him. For years he had kept people at a distance, convinced that caring too much would only lead to loss. But Hope had walked straight through the walls he had built around himself, carrying her tiny pups and a quiet plea for help. And somehow, that had changed everything. In the early hours of the morning, a sharp bark jolted Ryan awake. He sat up quickly, his heart pounding as he listened. From the front of the clinic, Linda's voice came through, sharp and tense. "Ryan, we've got company." Ryan was on his feet in an instant, his hand reaching instinctively for his holster as he hurried toward the front. Through the clinic's glass doors, he saw a black truck parked across the street, its headlights off. The men had found them. The black truck sat ominously across the street, its silhouette barely visible beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. Ryan stood frozen for half a second at the clinic's front window, his heart hammering in his chest. The headlights were off, but he could see the faint glow of cigarette embers from the cab. Whoever was in there was watching, waiting. Behind him, Linda was already on the radio, her voice steady but urgent. "Dispatch, this is Officer Carter. I need immediate backup at Dr. Patel's clinic on Main Street. We have eyes on the vehicle. Suspects may attempt to approach. Over." Ryan's gaze stayed fixed on the truck as Linda's words crackled through the air. "They're not leaving," he muttered. Linda turned toward him, her face pale but resolute. "They're waiting for a chance. You think they'll try to force their way in?" Ryan nodded slowly. "They've been chasing Hope for days. They're not just going to walk away." "We've got to keep them out," Linda replied firmly. Ryan stepped back from the window, his mind already racing through the possibilities. "Lock the front door. I'll check the back entrance and secure the place. They're not getting to her." "Got it," Linda said, grabbing her keys as she bolted the front doors. Ryan hurried down the hallway toward the back of the clinic, his boots thudding softly against the linoleum floor. The air felt heavy, thick with anticipation. He glanced into the exam room where Hope and the puppies were nestled on the blanket. Hope's head lifted slightly when Ryan entered, her ears twitching. Her body was tense, her instincts already sensing the danger outside. She let out a low, uneasy whine, glancing between Ryan and the door. "Easy, girl," Ryan said softly, crouching beside her. He ran a gentle hand over her head, trying to soothe her. "You're safe here, I promise." The puppies wriggled closer to her, unaware of the tension that had filled the clinic. For a moment, Ryan let himself pause. The sight of hope curled protectively around her babies, anchoring him. She had risked everything to keep them safe, and now it was his turn to do the same for her. Ryan rose to his feet, his jaw set. He checked the back door, twisting the lock to make sure it was secure. The alley behind the clinic was empty, but his gut told him it wouldn't stay that way for long. These men were desperate. They would try to force their way in if they had to. He turned and jogged back toward the front, where Linda stood near the window, her hand resting on her holstered weapon. "They're still out there," she muttered, eyes scanning the street. "I saw one of them get out of the truck a minute ago." Ryan cursed under his breath. "We need to buy time until backup arrives." "What do you have in mind?" Linda asked, her voice low. Ryan thought for a moment, his mind sharp. "We make it clear we're not backing down. If they know the cops are here and we're armed, they might hesitate." Linda nodded. "And if they don't?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "Then we hold them off." Outside, the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel sent chills up Ryan's spine. He and Linda exchanged a glance, both of them moving instinctively into position. Linda stayed near the front window, her eyes locked on the shadowy figure moving closer. Ryan, meanwhile, kept watch from the side hallway, ready to cut off any attempt to enter through the back. Through the glass, Ryan could see him now, one of the men who had been chasing Hope. Tall and broad, the man wore a dark jacket, his baseball cap pulled low over his face. He stepped into the faint circle of light from the street lamp, his posture stiff and deliberate as he stopped just short of the clinic door. "Inside," the man called out, his voice deep and gravelly. "We know you've got what's ours." Linda's hand hovered near her radio, her voice sharp as she called back. "This is police property. Step away from the building." The man chuckled darkly, the sound sending a shiver through Ryan. "That dog doesn't belong to you," the man growled. "Hand her over, and we'll leave quietly." Ryan stepped into view, his expression hard as steel. "Not a chance." The man took another step forward, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. "You don't understand, officer," he said slowly, almost mockingly. "You're getting in the way of business. That dog's worth a lot to us." "Enough to hunt her down for days?" Ryan shot back, his voice rising. "Enough to chase her through the woods until she nearly collapsed? You're not getting her back." The man's expression hardened, his lips pulling into a thin line. For a moment, everything was still so still that Ryan could hear the hum of the clinic's fluorescent lights overhead. Then, without warning, the man turned and walked back toward the black truck. Linda's brow furrowed. "What's he doing?" Ryan watched the man carefully, his instincts screaming that this wasn't over. "He's not giving up," he said grimly. "He's regrouping." As if to confirm Ryan's fears, the black truck's engine roared to life. Instead of leaving, the vehicle turned sharply, pulling around to the alley behind the clinic. Ryan cursed. "They're going for the back door." "Go," Linda said quickly. "I'll hold the front." Ryan didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the back hallway, drawing his weapon as he approached the rear exit. His pulse quickened as he heard the faint sound of footsteps outside, quick and deliberate. He pressed his back to the wall, his gun raised as he called out, "This is Officer Mitchell. Step away from the door." The footsteps stopped. There was a long, tense silence. Then came the sound of metal against metal, something scraping at the lock. "They're trying to force their way in." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I said step back." A loud bang echoed through the clinic as the men threw their weight against the door. The hinges groaned, and Ryan knew they wouldn't hold for long. He braced himself, his eyes narrowing. Suddenly, from the exam room, Hope's sharp bark cut through the air. It was loud and fierce, so loud that Ryan could hear it echoing through the empty streets outside. It wasn't just a bark, it was a warning. Ryan's focus sharpened. "Backup's coming," he called out, his voice echoing through the door. "You have about 30 seconds to make a better choice." The men outside hesitated. Ryan could hear their low voices muttering to each other, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps. Moments later, the truck's engine roared again. Through a small window near the back, Ryan caught a glimpse of taillights disappearing into the night. "They're leaving," Linda called from the front hallway. Ryan exhaled a breath. He didn't realize he had been holding, lowering his weapon. He stepped into the exam room, where Hope and her puppies still huddled together. Hope's eyes were fixed on him, her body still tense. "It's okay, girl," Ryan said softly, kneeling beside her. "They're gone. You did good." Hope let out a low sigh, her body finally relaxing as she rested her head against the blanket. Linda appeared in the doorway, her face pale but steady. "Backup's about 5 minutes out," she said quietly. "They'll sweep the area." Ryan nodded, his hand still resting on Hope's head. "They won't get another chance," he muttered. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The clinic was quiet again, broken only by the soft breathing of the puppies. Linda finally spoke, her voice softer now. "You know, Ryan, she chose the right place to run." Ryan glanced at Hope, her exhausted body curled protectively around her puppies. His heart softened as he replied, "Yeah, I think she did." And for the first time in days, Ryan let himself believe it. The quiet hum of the clinic felt louder now that the chaos had subsided. Outside, red and blue lights painted the walls of the examination room in shifting streaks as backup officers arrived, sweeping the streets and surrounding alleyways. Ryan stood near the back door, his hand resting on his belt as he watched 2 patrol officers examine the damaged lock. "They tried to force their way in," one officer confirmed, his flashlight scanning the scratches on the metal. "Looks like they had a crowbar or something similar. Lucky you stopped them when you did." Ryan grunted in response, his gaze distant. He still felt the lingering adrenaline in his chest, but the immediate danger had passed. For now. In the corner of the room, Hope lay curled tightly around her puppies, her eyes half closed but watchful. She still hadn't let herself relax completely. Every sharp noise, every heavy footstep from outside made her ears twitch. She was protecting her pups, even in her weakened state. Ryan crouched beside her, his voice low and steady. "You're safe now, girl. I promise." Hope's tail thumped softly against the blanket, but her eyes stayed fixed on him, as if waiting to see if he really meant it. Linda appeared at the doorway, her expression tight. "Ryan, we need to talk." He straightened, brushing the dust off his jeans as he followed her out of the room and into the clinic's small lobby. The other officers were gathered there, quietly exchanging updates. Linda stopped near the front window, her voice low. "They're gone for now, but this isn't over. Dispatch just got word that Victor Hale's truck was spotted heading out of town. The troopers are searching the back roads." Ryan frowned. "He's running." "Looks like it," Linda said, crossing her arms. "But let's not get comfortable. This guy has connections. If he thinks he can come back for Hope, he will." Ryan leaned against the window frame, his brow furrowed. "We can't keep her here forever. It's too exposed." "I agree," Linda replied, "but we need to figure out where to take her, that's safe somewhere. They won't think to look." Ryan thought for a moment before glancing at her. "What about my cabin?" Linda raised an eyebrow. "The one out near Cedar Ridge?" "It's isolated," Ryan said firmly. "Surrounded by woods, no neighbors for miles. It's off the grid enough that Victor won't find it." Linda considered his suggestion, then nodded. "It's a good idea. I can follow you out there to make sure you're not being tailed." Ryan pushed off the wall, his decision made. "I'll pack her and the puppies up now. We move fast." Linda placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him for a moment. "You know you don't have to do this alone, right?" Ryan's expression softened slightly, Though he said nothing, he nodded once and turned back toward the exam room. The trip to Cedar Ridge was quiet, but Ryan couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Linda's SUV stayed close behind him as he drove his truck along the winding, empty road out of town. The moon was high now, casting pale light over the thick line of trees that bordered the road. Ryan glanced at the rearview mirror every few minutes, his instincts still on high alert. In the back seat, Hope lay curled up beside the crate of puppies. She was awake, though quiet, her wide eyes fixed on the passing trees outside. "You're going to like it out here," Ryan said softly, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to reassure Hope or himself. "It's quiet. No one will bother us." The cabin had been his retreat for years long before he joined the Willow Creek police force. It was a small, simple place his grandfather had built decades ago, surrounded by acres of forest. Ryan went there whenever the weight of the world felt too heavy, a place where he could think, reflect, or just be. Tonight, it was more than that. It was a sanctuary. Up ahead, Ryan saw the turnoff to the gravel road that led to the cabin. He signaled to Linda, who flashed her headlights to confirm she saw it. As they pulled off the main road and into the forest, Ryan felt some of the tension in his shoulders ease. The black truck wouldn't follow them out here, not yet anyway. The cabin came into view minutes later, a small wooden structure tucked into a clearing surrounded by towering pine trees. Ryan parked his truck near the front porch and stepped out, listening to the silence that enveloped the woods. The only sounds were the faint rustling of leaves in the breeze and the quiet chirping of crickets. Linda pulled up beside him and climbed out of her SUV, her boots crunching against the gravel. "Not bad," she said, scanning the area with an approving nod. "This'll do." Ryan opened the back door of the truck, crouching to help Hope out. She moved carefully, her legs still stiff, but her nose lifted as she sniffed the fresh, clean air. Her tail wagged faintly as she took in the quiet surroundings. "See?" Ryan said softly, stroking her head. "Told you it'd be nice out here." Linda grabbed the crate of puppies from the back seat, carrying it up the steps to the cabin. "Let's get them settled inside. It's getting colder out here." Ryan led Hope up the steps and into the cabin. Inside, the place was just as he had left it, simple and uncluttered. The main room held an old couch, a wood-burning stove, and a small kitchen area tucked into one corner. A narrow hallway led to the single bedroom in the back. He spread out a blanket near the wood stove, arranging it carefully before leading Hope to lie down. Linda set the crate beside her, and Ryan gently lifted each puppy out, placing them next to their mother. Hope immediately curled around them, her body finally relaxing. Linda smiled faintly as she watched the scene. "She knows she's safe now." Ryan nodded, though he remained wary. "For tonight, at least." Linda straightened, glancing toward the window. "I'll take first watch. You need some sleep, Ryan. You've been running on fumes for 2 days." Ryan shook his head. "I'm fine." "Ryan," Linda said firmly, her gaze steady, "get some rest. I'll wake you if anything happens." For a moment, Ryan hesitated, but the exhaustion was catching up to him. He knew Linda was right. With a reluctant nod, he moved toward the couch, collapsing onto the worn cushions. The crackle of the wood stove filled the cabin with warmth, and the faint sounds of the forest outside melted into the background. Ryan's eyes drifted toward Hope, who was already dozing with the puppies nestled close. "Good girl," he murmured softly, before his eyes finally closed. Outside, Linda stood near her SUV, her breath misting in the cool night air. She scanned the tree line, her hand resting on her radio, as her sharp eyes watched for any movement. The forest was quiet, eerily quiet, but Linda had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, her instincts told her they weren't alone. In the distance, hidden between the thick trees, the faint sound of snapping twigs echoed through the woods. Linda's hand tightened around her flashlight. She clicked on the beam, sweeping it across the darkness. Nothing moved, but the feeling of being watched lingered. "Come on," she muttered under her breath, her heart beating faster. Back inside the cabin, Ryan stirred on the couch, his dreams restless. The image of Victor Hale's truck flashed in his mind, followed by the sound of Hope's frantic barking. When Ryan's eyes shot open, he realized it wasn't a dream. From the blanket near the stove, Hope was growling low and steady. Her eyes were fixed on the window, her ears pressed back. Ryan sat up quickly, his pulse spiking. He grabbed his gun from the coffee table and moved toward the window. Outside, the woods were dark and still, but Ryan knew what Hope already sensed. Someone was out there. The low growl from Hope rumbled through the cabin, steady and unrelenting. Ryan froze, his hand tightening around the grip of his weapon as he moved silently toward the window. Outside, the darkness seemed endless, the shadows between the trees shifting slightly in the faint moonlight. Hope's gaze remained fixed, her ears pricked forward, her body tense as though preparing for the worst. The puppies stirred near her, letting out soft whimpers as they snuggled deeper into the blanket. "Easy, girl," Ryan whispered softly, though his heart was pounding in his chest. He pulled the curtain back just enough to see. The woods outside looked still at first glance, but Ryan's instincts told him otherwise. It was too quiet. The sounds of the forest, the distant chirping of crickets, the rustling of branches had gone silent. That meant someone was out there, close enough to disturb the natural rhythm of the woods. Linda's voice cut through the silence, low but sharp. "Ryan?" Ryan turned to see her standing just inside the door, her face pale in the dim light. "There's movement out there," she said quietly. "I saw a shadow near the edge of the clearing." "They're close," Ryan nodded, his jaw tight. "They're here for her." Linda glanced toward Hope, who was still growling softly, her body curled protectively around the puppies. "What's the play?" Ryan thought for a moment, his mind racing. "We can't wait for them to make the first move. If they get inside, it's going to get ugly fast." Linda nodded, gripping her flashlight in one hand and resting her other hand on her holstered weapon. "So, we take control?" "Yeah," Ryan said, his voice low but steady. "I'll head out the back and circle around. You stay here with Hope. If anything happens, if they try to come in, you know what to do." Linda didn't argue. "Got it. Be careful, Ryan." Ryan crouched near Hope one last time, his hand brushing gently over her head. "You stay with Linda, girl. Keep those pups safe." Hope let out a soft huff in response, her growl fading just slightly as she looked at him. Ryan grabbed his flashlight and slipped through the back door, stepping out into the cool night air. The forest felt alive around him, its stillness a deceptive mask for the danger that lurked unseen. He moved quickly but quietly, keeping low as he circled around the cabin. His flashlight stayed off for now. He didn't want to give away his position. Every sound felt magnified as Ryan crept through the underbrush, the crunch of twigs under his boots, the rustle of leaves brushing against his jacket. He paused near the edge of the clearing, scanning the darkness between the trees. Then he saw it. A faint beam of light bobbed through the woods, coming closer. Ryan's pulse quickened. Someone was moving, methodically and slowly, closing in on the cabin. The silhouette of a man emerged through the darkness, carrying what looked like a crowbar in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Ryan's stomach churned with anger. Victor Hale! He knew it had to be him. Staying low, Ryan circled around to approach from behind. The man's movements were deliberate, his flashlight sweeping the ground as though searching for tracks. The glow illuminated deep boot prints leading from the clearing toward the cabin. Ryan's voice rang out, low and sharp. "Drop it, now!" The man froze, the beam of his flashlight jerking upward. For a moment, the two of them stood in the dark woods, facing each other. Ryan's weapon was raised, steady in his grip. "Turn around," Ryan ordered. "Hands where I can see them." The man turned slowly, his flashlight now aimed at the ground. Ryan caught a glimpse of his face unshaven, his eyes hard and mean beneath the shadow of his baseball cap. "You again." Victor Hale muttered, his voice low and dripping with contempt. You don't know what you're getting in the middle of, officer. I know enough, Ryan shot back. You've been chasing that dog for days. Now you're trespassing on private property. You want to explain yourself? Victor's lip curled in a sneer. That dog belongs to me. Not anymore, Ryan said coldly. She's safe now, and you're done. Victor's grip tightened on the crowbar in his hand. You think you can stop me? I don't think, Ryan replied, his voice deadly calm. I know. Put the crowbar down, or I will put you down. For a long moment, Victor didn't move. The tension in the air was electric, each second stretching longer than the last. Then, as if deciding it wasn't worth it, Victor slowly dropped the crowbar to the ground. It landed with a dull thud, the sound echoing through the woods. Smart choice, Ryan said. Now get on your knees. Victor hesitated, his jaw tight, but he complied. As he lowered himself to the ground, Ryan grabbed his radio and spoke into it quietly. Linda, I've got one in custody. Keep your eyes on the cabin, there might be more out here. Understood. Linda's voice crackled back. Hope's calm now, but I'll stay alert. Ryan kept his weapon trained on Victor as he moved closer, pulling a set of handcuffs from his belt. You're under arrest for trespassing, harassment, and suspicion of animal cruelty. I'd suggest keeping your mouth shut from here on out. Victor glared at him, his expression dark. You think this end with me? Ryan ignored the comment as he secured the cuffs and pulled Victor to his feet. You can explain that to a judge. By the time Ryan marched Victor back to the cabin, Linda was waiting near the front door, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw Ryan pushing Victor forward, the handcuffs glinting in the light. Nice work, Linda said, her voice steady. But where's the truck? Ryan frowned. He didn't have it. He was on foot. Linda's face darkened. So someone else might still be out there. Victor smirked faintly, his lips pulling into a cruel grin. You think you've won? He muttered. You don't even know what you're up against. Ryan turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? Victor didn't answer. He just stared at Ryan, his expression smug, like he knew something Ryan didn't. Lock him in the back of my truck, Ryan said to Linda, his voice cold. I'll call in transport to take him to the station. Linda nodded and took Victor by the arm, guiding him away. Ryan turned back toward the cabin, his eyes scanning the tree line once more. Victor's words gnawed at the back of his mind. There was something else going on, something bigger. Inside, the soft whimpers of the puppies pulled him back to reality. Ryan stepped into the warm glow of the cabin, shutting the door securely behind him. Hope looked up at him from her place near the wood stove, her brown eyes tired but trusting. You're safe now, Ryan said quietly, crouching beside her. I won't let them get to you. Not ever again. Hope let out a soft sigh, resting her head on her paws as the puppies snuggled closer to her side. Ryan sat back against the couch, his weapon still close at hand. He knew tonight wasn't over. There were still questions unanswered, still shadows lurking out there in the woods. But for now, Hope and her puppies were safe. And that was enough. As he sat there, watching over them, Ryan realized something. It wasn't just the dog he was protecting anymore. It was the part of himself he'd kept buried for so long. The part that believed in second chances, in hope, and in the fight to do what was right. No matter how dark the night seemed, Ryan would keep fighting. Because sometimes, a little hope was all you needed to get through. The first rays of morning light crept through the trees, breaking the darkness that had blanketed the woods all night. Inside the cabin, the soft crackle of the wood stove still filled the air, mixing with the faint sounds of the puppies stirring. Ryan Mitchell sat slumped on the couch, his eyes heavy, the weight of exhaustion finally catching up with him. He had spent most of the night on high alert, listening to every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind outside. The golden retriever, Hope, lay near the stove with her 4 pups snuggled against her. For the first time since Ryan had found her, she looked at peace, her body fully relaxed, her breathing steady. She seemed to understand that, at last, she was safe. Ryan's gaze lingered on her as he sipped from a lukewarm cup of coffee Linda had brewed hours earlier. Something about seeing her like this, finally at rest, stirred a deep sense of satisfaction in him. She had been running for days, carrying her family through danger and exhaustion, but she hadn't given up. "Good girl," Ryan murmured softly. A soft knock on the cabin door broke the quiet. Ryan stiffened for a moment, his instincts still raw, but Linda's voice called from outside. "It's me." Ryan set his coffee down and unlatched the door. Linda stepped in, her breath misting faintly in the cool morning air. She looked as tired as he felt, but her expression held a quiet determination. "Transport just left with Victor Hale," she said, pulling off her gloves and tucking them into her jacket pocket. "They'll process him at the station. He won't be causing trouble for a long time." Ryan nodded, relief washing over him. "Good." Linda glanced at Hope and the puppies, her face softening. "How are they doing?" "Better," Ryan replied, his voice quieter. "She's finally resting. Puppies seem fine too." Linda crouched beside the crate, reaching out to stroke one of the tiny pups. It let out a sleepy whimper before snuggling back against its siblings. "They're fighters, just like their mom," Linda said with a faint smile. Ryan leaned against the wall, watching them. "Yeah, she didn't give up on them, even when everything was against her." Linda looked up at him, her tone gentle. "And neither did you." Ryan shrugged off the comment, though something about her words settled deep in his chest. "She did all the hard work," he replied, nodding toward Hope. "I just kept her safe." Linda stood and crossed her arms, studying him. "You're not giving yourself enough credit, Ryan. Most people wouldn't have gone this far. You didn't just keep her safe, you gave her a chance." Ryan didn't reply. He turned back toward Hope, watching as she blinked up at him with those soft brown eyes. There was no fear in them now, no desperation, only trust. "Speaking of chances," Linda continued, her voice carefully measured, "animal control called. They'll need to find homes for the puppies once they're old enough to leave her." Ryan frowned slightly. The thought of the puppies being separated from their mother didn't sit right with him. "And what about her?" he asked, glancing back at Linda. "She'll go to a rescue," Linda said. "They'll make sure she's adopted by someone who can give her a good home." Ryan's chest tightened at the thought of Hope leaving, of her being handed off to strangers after everything she had been through. It didn't feel right. He had seen the worst of her fear and the depths of her courage. She had chosen him when she had nowhere else to go, trusted him with her life and her pups. Linda must have seen the look on his face because her tone softened. "You know, if you wanted to keep her, no one's going to stop you." Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked at Hope again, taking in the way her head rested on her paws as she watched him, as though she understood every word being said. "She's been through enough change," Ryan said quietly. "She deserves stability." Linda smiled faintly. "Then you know what you need to do." Later that day, as the sun climbed higher into the sky, Ryan stood outside the cabin, leaning against the porch railing as he watched the woods. The clearing felt different now, quieter, safer, as though the weight of the past few days had finally lifted. Hope sat beside him on the porch, her fur catching the warm sunlight. She seemed stronger now, her posture relaxed, but confident. Ryan glanced down at her, unable to help the small smile that tugged at his lips. "You like it out here, don't you?" he murmured. Hope lifted her head, her tail thumping softly against the wood. Ryan took a deep breath, staring out into the trees. For years, this cabin had been his escape, a place where he could hide from the world and the parts of himself he didn't want to face. But now, it felt different. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. He crouched beside Hope, resting a hand on her head. "What do you think?" he asked softly. "You want to stick around?" Hope blinked up at him, her eyes warm and trusting. Then, as if to give her answer, she leaned into his touch, pressing her head gently against his hand. Ryan's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said softly. "I thought so." He heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway and turned to see Linda's SUV approaching. She parked and climbed out, carrying a file folder under her arm. "Thought I'd drop off the paperwork for you," she said with a knowing smile, handing it over. Ryan took the folder and opened it, his heart giving an unfamiliar tug when he saw the adoption forms inside. Linda crossed her arms and leaned against the railing beside him. "Figured you'd need a little nudge." Ryan glanced at her, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You're pushy, you know that?" "Only when it's for the right reasons," Linda shot back, grinning. Ryan signed the forms without hesitation. As he handed them back to her, Hope let out a happy bark, her tail wagging furiously. "She knows," Linda said with a chuckle. Ryan reached down and scratched behind Hope's ears, his voice quiet but warm. "You're home now, girl. For good." The weeks that followed brought changes, good ones. Hope's strength returned quickly, and the puppies grew bigger each day, their tiny whimpers turning into playful yips as they tumbled over each other in the cabin. Maria visited regularly to check on them, always bringing supplies and a smile. When the time came, Ryan made sure the puppies were adopted into good homes families who would love them the way they deserved. It wasn't easy letting them go, but he knew it was right. Hope stayed with him, though, her place beside Ryan as solid and certain as the earth beneath their feet. Ryan started bringing Hope with him to the station during the day, where she quickly became a favorite among the other officers. She would greet visitors with a wag of her tail and sit quietly beside Ryan's desk, keeping watch as though she were part of the team. Her story spread through Willow Creek, inspiring others to step up and speak out against animal cruelty. The town came together to support local rescues, raising money and volunteering their time to help dogs like Hope find safety and love. For Ryan, everything felt different now. He had spent so much of his life keeping people at a distance, convinced that opening up would only lead to loss. But Hope had changed that. She had walked into his life when he least expected it, carrying her quiet strength and an unshakable will to survive. She had taught him that trust was worth the risk, and that sometimes, even when the world felt dark, hope could find a way through. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the clearing, Ryan sat on the porch of the cabin with Hope lying beside him. The air was still, filled only with the quiet sounds of the forest. Ryan looked down at her, his voice soft. "You saved me too, you know." Hope lifted her head and looked at him, her tail wagging faintly. Ryan smiled, letting the peace settle deep into his bones. For the first time in a long time, he felt whole. And as the sun disappeared behind the trees, casting the world in soft golden light, Ryan realized that Hope hadn't just found a home, she had given him one too. And so, Hope's journey reminds us that even in the darkest of moments, kindness, trust, and perseverance can lead us to brighter days. Her story is not just about survival, it's about the unbreakable bond that forms when we choose to care, to protect, and to give others a second chance. If this story touched your heart, and you believe in spreading hope, kindness, and courage, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire and remind us of the good in the world. Together, let's keep hope alive, one story at a time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.